Good evening to all of you. This is Pius. Today is day 8 for daily answer writing program of History Optional. And what is the question of today? Today's question is Fa-Hien's travel accounts provide a unique perspective on Indian society, religion and polity during the Gupta period. Discuss the historical value of Fa-Hien's observation in reconstructing the history of ancient India. What are the strengths and limitations of his account as a source for understanding Gupta-era India? Now this is the question. So we are just changing little bit the approach for the discussion, and we are just trying desperately to get some certain such details that can help you even in the pre-examination and to collect some other facts also. So let's see first Fa-Hien. So Fa-Hien is basically the Chinese Buddhist monk born around 337 AD in China, and one of the earliest travelers to document his journey to India in detail, with a strong interest in studying Buddhist scriptures and practice. Now these can be used for writing the introduction. Now it was the Jin dynasty in which this fellow Fa-Hien was there, and in fact he was just being promoted by the dynasty in order to come here, or the rulers of this dynasty. So he traveled extensively across northern and central India between 399 to 414 AD during the reign of Gupta Emperor Chandragupta II, who was there as the ruler of Gupta at that point of time. And he documented the impressions of Indian cities, Buddhist monasteries, stupas, relics, and noted the prosperity and social structure. Okay. Now if we'll see Fa-Hien, in that case, he mentioned the flourishing of Buddhism, but noted the theistic Hinduism was also widespread. He observed division of Buddhism and Buddhism into Mahayana and Hinayana. Then he also talked about the religious tolerance among different faiths. Numerous charitable institutions like hospitals are being mentioned by him. But unfortunately, he did not mention about Chandragupta II. The route which was followed by him, so Fa-Hien's journey started in Central Asia. He traveled through present-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then further into India. Important cities which were covered by him that included Mathura, Kannauj, Kapilvastu, Lumbini, Kusinagar, Vaisali, Patliputra, Kasi, and Rajgir. So these are all the important cities which he traveled. After leaving India, he continued his journey by sea traveling through Sri Lanka and Sumatra before returning to China. Now this is the route of the traveling of this fellow, right? He starts from China, and then by adopting this particular route, he is coming to India. The various cities of India were visited by him, and then he goes to Sri Lanka from the Tamralipti port, and further he goes to China via this sea route, and that's how he is returning to his country. Now there are certain interesting facts for Fa-Hien that I would like to discuss, because Fa-Hien was basically, as I told you, that he was basically a normal fellow in this Jin dynasty. So he was living in this Jin dynasty. और Fa-Hien के जो फादर थे वो Fa-Hien को 3 साल की एज में ही बुद्धिस्ट मॉन्क बनाना चाहते थे. और उसके पीछे रीज़न क्या है? Because the 3 elder brothers or siblings of Fa-Hien, they died in a very young age. So that's why his father was very scared. So since he wanted to save his son, that's why he decided to make Fa-Hien as a Buddhist monk. 3 साल की एज में he sent to him to Buddhist monastery, but then unfortunately rest of the people were not quite convinced with this, and that's why Fa-Hien came back to home. So Fa-Hien was there for some period of time, but after a few years again, what happened? He got sick, and he was so sick that his father got scared, and that's why he sent him back to Buddhist monastery. बट वहाँ पे क्या होता है, 2 दिन रहने के बाद Fa-Hien पूरी तरीके से ठीक हो जाते हैं, और उसके बाद Fa-Hien ने वापस घर आने के लिए मना कर दिया, और फिर Fa-Hien जो है वो मोनेस्ट्री में ही रह गए. सो दिस इज हाउ द monastic life of this fellow starts. But then there are some other ups and downs came in his life, such as after when Fa-Hien was of 10 years, at that point of time his father died. So once his father died, since his mother was alone, and in fact she was incapable of handling everything by her own, that's why his uncle suggested him to return home. But then Fa-Hien was very committed to Buddhism at that point of time, and that's why he refused to come back. And then Fa-Hien got a different idea, and what he did, Fa-Hien made a house for her nearby this monastery, and that's how Fa-Hien had been doing both the things. At one hand, he had been leading the monastic life. On the other hand, Fa-Hien also taking care of his mother and family, and that's how Fa-Hien managed both of the things. जब Fa-Hien थोड़े बड़े हुए तो Fa-Hien के बाकी फेलोज ने कहा कि जो है they should come to India in order to collect the Buddhist scriptures, and that's how this planning is coming. As you can see, the route which was followed by Fa-Hien to come to India, and undoubtedly it was a very challenging route. It was very challenging. Why it was very challenging? Because they had to cross different kind of terrains. Then only they could have come to India. As you can see that they were crossing this China, and then they were coming to Central Asia. So during crossing Central Asia, they had to cross basically the Taklamakan desert. तो जब वो लोग तकलामकान डेजर्ट क्रॉस कर रहे थे, since it was such a vast desert, in fact in his memoir he had been writing about this. So he's writing that it was very tough for them, and in fact majority of the people along with Fa-Hien, they died, and it was literally a sort of tough journey that he had to cover. In fact, what happened, there's a description what he is writing in his book, that only through the bones which were there on the routes, they could identify that this is the route, because earlier travelers have followed the same route. It meant that this is the route. So only by seeing the bones they could identify the identify the routes. So you can understand how tough it is. Once they crossed this desert, then they reached to the snow mountains, and then crossing the snow mountain was also very tough for them. And then finally he reaches to Afghanistan, and Gandhar was the first place where he got the first sight of Buddhism, because he saw the monasteries in that part. He saw the various stupas and viharas in this part, and that's how he could realize the glorious nature of Buddhism in India, because he was very much astonished by seeing all these kind of things. And in his description, he is writing that he was so obsessed with these architectures and all, that he was speechless and he was not able to define them properly. So then further he enters into India. जब वो इंडिया में ट्रैवल कर रहे थे, उनके साथ भी बड़े कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट वाकयात हुए. एक इंसिडेंट हुआ जब उनको गंगा क्रॉस करना था, और बाकी सारे लोगों ने उनको गंगा क्रॉस करने के लिए मना किया, बिकॉज इट वाज अ रेनी सीजन. उन्होंने कहा कि सिंस द फ्लो इज टू हाई एंड दैट्स व्हाई इट्स वेरी फास्ट, एंड दैट्स व्हाई देयर आर हाई चांसेस कि दिस फेलो माइट मेट विद एन एक्सीडेंट. But he was so excited to collect the Buddhist scriptures that he refused all these suggestions, and then finally he decided to cross it. But then while crossing this river, ultimately he faced so many problems, and only the villagers somehow could rescue him. So these kind of difficulties or the challenges he had been facing. So undoubtedly the kind of journey, you can't see it just like a journey कि ठीक है एक आदमी है जो चाइना से इंडिया आ गया. I think when you understand, when you see or you study Fa-Hien, you all should keep in mind how tough the struggle was for him, correct? And then as I told you that he visited most of the important sites of Buddhism, and finally from Tamlipti fort he leaves country, and I think this is one of the earliest description that we do find for the Tamlipti. And then we understand how important the Tamlipti was for Indian trade, specifically India's connection with Southeast Asia. So that's how he is returning. So once he returned home, and after that he basically carried so many books, so many books, and most of these books were basically written in Sanskrit. So that's why he learned Sanskrit in India, and then after getting back to his country, with the help of this Buddhist monk that's called as Buddhabhadra, he started the process of translation, and rest of his life he kept on translating those Buddhist books, correct? Among those books which were translated by him, there are some important, which are Mahaparinibban Sutta, that's a very important text, Then apart from that, Mahasangika Vinaya, that's another text. And then it is Sayukta Vidharma Sutra, that is an Sastra, sorry, this is another text which is translated by him. So all these texts were there, which were translated by him. And finally his journey in India was recorded in the book that's called as Fo Ko Ki, that is called as Travel of Fa-Hien, or it is also called as the Record of Buddhist Kingdom. And this is one of the books which is translated into multiple languages, that includes primarily English, French and Japanese. So in all these languages, there were 3 translations, English translations are available to us. This is one of the translations, which is the name of the author is not mentioned here. So there were 3 translations. So there were several translations are there. So these are some basic description of this fellow or his book of Fa-Hien, correct? Now coming to the point, right, after these details. So when it comes to the details, of course, Fa-Hien's record is undoubtedly very important in order to know about India. And since he was a Buddhist traveler, so that's why he must be focusing in some limited parts of it. That was quite obvious. So if we'll see that, like, in that case, we'll be able to say that, like, this fellow was covering various parts of Indian society, and like we can divide them into multiple categories. So whatsoever information that we have been getting, among them undoubtedly the religious, in religious information are the most important one. So when it comes to religious information, so he talks about basically the state of Buddhism, and according to him, Buddhism was very flourished. He is dealing with the various pilgrimage sites, and in fact he is also dealing with the monastic life, the monastic discipline, right, the daily rituals and everything. So exactly to understand the condition of Buddhism, this text is undoubtedly one of the best books that we can follow. Apart from the religious insight, like, we can also talk about the political details that he had been providing. Those being a religious traveler, being a pilgrim, right, he was least interested in the political details, and that's why I told you that he is not providing great amount of information on basically the, like, various aspects of polity, or even Chandragupta II also. But even though he is talking about the law and order, he is talking about the discipline, he is talking about the well maintained infrastructure, he is talking about very liberal punishments and all. So this is how he had minimal taxation is also one thing, like, he has discussed, and he talks about how the prosperity was there. So this is how he has been, like, giving some insight even to the polity. Apart from that, his book is even giving us information on the economy of that period. And the way I did tell you that since he had been traveling in such a long part of India, and that's why he could, like, give very good condition or very good status of basically craft practices, and especially the trade and commerce. As I told you that since he had been using the Tamlipti port and the Ganga river, and that's why whatsoever trading activities were happening in Ganga river, and apart from that, like, Tamlipti port, so all these descriptions are given. The way I did tell you that since from here, like, he has been going to Southeast Asian countries, and that's why he is talking about the trade by that time, which has become very flourished trade between India and Southeast Asian kingdoms. That was also highlighted by him. Apart from that, there's another aspect, like, that he has highlighted is the justice. So according to him, India had well organized administrative system, effective governance, right, and public welfare was also being followed by the rulers at that point of time. So these are various information he had been providing on polity and economy. Apart from that, like, he had been providing even information on society also, society and culture, I must say. So he's talking about the caste society, the Varna system, the various occupations of these Varnas, and then he's also talking about the morality of the society, or let's say the ethics and morality, which were very high among the Indians. And of course, it was the land of Buddhism. So since, like, the reason because of what he came all the way from China to India, so it is quite obvious that he'll be praising all these kind of things. That's how he has talked about a very ethical society in India. Apart from that, he has also discussed about the daily life, the customs, various cultural aspects, and that's how he had been providing information on these kind of things. So this is how we can say that this fellow has provided, like, information on various aspects, and specifically his information on society and culture, and then we can say the religion. That is very important. One point I missed to tell you, that when he is writing about religion, so he doesn't write only about Buddhism, but then he also writes that Hinduism was also flourishing at that point of time. So he's highlighted all these parts. But then along with this, like, we must talk about certain limitations also of his writing. So when it comes to the limitations, the first and the most important limitation is the religious bias. Undoubtedly, he was a pilgrim, and that's why his main focus was on religion, and that's why he was more into collecting the scriptures and all, rather than, like, focusing on the other things. So while traveling, whatsoever information he could get, like, he's just compiling them in his book that's called as Fokoki, right? So that's why we can say the biased informations are there. The other problem which is there, that this fellow Fa-Hien, since he was, like, coming to the land of Buddha, and that's why he had this biases that he wanted to glorify the land of Buddha or their God. So this is the reason because of what sometimes over glorification of India or over ethical. India has over ethical society. India was having the over ethical society. That was another dimension which is being discussed by him. The ethnocentric perspective, like, remains another important, like, problem, because cultural misunderstanding. Of course, a person coming from China, like, he tried to see everything with this Chinese perspective, and that's how we can say, like, he's having certain certain problems. So this is how we can talk about the various limitations this fellow had in his writing, correct? But even though it can be used as a beautiful source of history writing. And when it comes to the conclusion, so basically all these scholars, Romila Thapar and then A.L. Bossam, they are talking about it. But then most importantly, there was one scholar, the scholar Tan Sen Sen. Like he is glorifying a lot, and in fact he talks about that cultural closeness coming because of this fellow, and that's how, like, his book is providing so much cultural information, cultural information of India. But then apart from this, like, some other, like, scholars that could be also mentioned, and specifically that includes such as S.K. Saraswati, and he discusses basically the interplay of religion and art which was being followed in India, which is discussed, like, in Fa-Hien's book. So that's why we can talk about, like, one or two scholars, and that's how we can conclude this answer by saying this, ki undoubtedly this is a very important book, provides valuable information, but then again certain limitations are there, and that's why it should be cross-examined with the other available text, and that's how it could be used in a better way. That's all about this answer. Thank you very much.